The morning sun spilled across the wide veranda of the Moyo residence, bathing the gardens in golden light. Birds chattered in the jacaranda trees, their purple blossoms carpeting the driveway. Inside, the aroma of fresh bread filled the air as Mr. and Mrs. Moyo prepared for another busy day. They were respected across the city, not just as successful businesspeople but as devout Christians whose faith guided every decision. To them, wealth was not a crown but a tool, something entrusted by God to bless others. Their home, though beautiful, was not a shrine to riches but a sanctuary filled with scripture, prayer, and laughter. And at the center of their joy was John, their only child. At 8 years old, John was bright-eyed and curious, his head always full of questions. He loved sitting at the dining table during morning devotions, flipping through his children's Bible, or listening to his father explain verses with patience. One morning, as John slurped his porridge a little too loudly, his mother tapped his shoulder. "John, remember, even in small things we give thanks. Chew slowly. Everything is a gift from God." John grinned, his face lighting up. "Yes, Mama." His father chuckled. "He's growing fast, this one. Soon he'll be teaching us." Laughter filled the table, but their joy carried a weight of responsibility. For years, the Moyos had prayed about how to use their wealth for God's glory. At last, an idea had taken root, a Christian college that would equip young people for ministry and professional service alike. That afternoon, they sat with their trusted friend, Pastor Dubé, in the quiet of his study. The pastor leaned back in his chair, eyes wide as he listened. "You're serious? Bonding everything you own?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. Mrs. Moyo nodded firmly. "Yes, Pastor. The Lord impressed it on our hearts. We must sow into this college. The land, the company, even the house. It will all be security for the loan." Pastor Dubé hesitated. "That is no small decision. What of John's future?" Mr. Moyo clasped his hands. "That is precisely why. If anything happens to us, John will not be left with idle wealth that breeds greed. He will inherit a testimony of faith. The church will repay in 15 years. By then he will be a man, and all will be restored to him." The pastor sat in silence, moved by their conviction. He knew they were people of prayer who did not act rashly. "And if your family questions it?" he asked gently. Mrs. Moyo sighed, her voice quiet. "Then let it be sealed. The bank must not reveal details until the debt is cleared. Even our relatives cannot touch what belongs to God." They prayed together that night, committing everything into God's hands. None of them knew what the coming days would hold, but there was a strange sense of urgency, as though heaven itself was setting things in order. As the sun set, John ran into the room, holding a wooden toy car. "Papa, race with me," he cried, tugging his father. The city buzzed with activity as Mr. and Mrs. Moyo prepared for their business trip. John, dressed in his school uniform, clung to his mother's skirt, pouting. "Must you go today? Can't the meeting wait?" he asked. His mother knelt, smoothing his hair. "My darling, it is important. But we will return before you know it. You'll be with Auntie Grace after school, and I've told her to make your favorite stew." John forced a smile, though his young heart ached. His father crouched beside him and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Remember what I told you, son. God never leaves us. Even when we travel, His angels watch over you. Be strong for Mama, "Yes, Papa," John whispered. The couple kissed him goodbye, promising to bring him a small gift from their trip. As the car pulled out of the driveway, John ran to the gate, waving until it disappeared around the corner. He had no idea it would be the last time he saw them alive. The accident happened miles away, on a stretch of road lined with thorn bushes. A truck lost control on a bend, colliding head-on with the Moyo's car. The crash was brutal and final. Both died instantly. Back in the city, the news spread like wildfire. Phones rang, whispers filled offices, and soon the pastor's study was crowded with shocked church elders. Pastor Dubé sat in silence, head bowed. He had buried many in his years of ministry, but this news pierced him deeply. His thoughts raced to John, innocent, unprepared, and suddenly alone. That evening, as John played with his toy car, the maid entered the sitting room with tear-stained eyes. She struggled to speak. "John, there has been an accident." The boy blinked, puzzled. "What kind of accident? Are Mama and Papa hurt?" Her lips trembled. They are with Jesus now." For a moment, the words made no sense. John stared at her blankly, then shook his head. "No, you're wrong. Papa said he'd come back. He promised." His voice cracked, and the toy car slipped from his hands onto the floor. That night, John cried himself to sleep, clutching the blanket that still carried his mother's scent. The funeral was a blur of black clothing, hushed conversations, and wailing voices. The church overflowed with mourners. Business partners spoke of the Moyo's success, church members testified of their faith, and neighbors remembered their kindness. But in the corner, sitting stiffly in a small suit, was John, his young face frozen in disbelief. While prayers rose, his uncles whispered among themselves. "We must secure the house deeds quickly," one muttered. "And the company papers too," another replied, eyes gleaming. "Leave the boy with the maid. She knows him already. We will pay her a small salary. That will keep her quiet." Their words carried no hint of grief, only hunger for what was left behind. From the pulpit, Pastor Dubé watched. His heart ached. Not only for John's loss but also for the storm he sensed gathering around the child. Yet he remembered the Moyo's instructions. Their estate was already sealed by law and prayer. Even in death, they had shielded their son. When the service ended, John lingered by the graveside long after most mourners had gone. He clutched the pastor's hand tightly. "Will Mama and Papa ever come back?" he whispered. Tears filled the pastor's eyes. "No, my boy. But one day, you will see them again in heaven. For now, you must be strong. God has not forgotten you." John nodded faintly, though he did not fully understand. All he knew was that life had suddenly become very. The days after the funeral were heavy with silence. John sat often by the window, staring at the gate, half hoping his parents' car might return. But instead of comfort, he overheard hushed arguments in the lounge. His uncles had gathered around the dining table, papers spread out before them. Their voices rose and fell, dripping with impatience. "The house deed is here," muttered Uncle Patrick, thumbing through a folder. "And the farm records. Even the company shares. All under our hands now." Uncle Simon leaned back smugly. "Good. We must begin selling before debts swallow everything. The boy is only 8. What use has he for all this?" "But we must not appear greedy," said the third, narrowing his eyes. "We will tell the maid to keep him. Promise her a small monthly allowance. That should silence her." John, standing in the hallway, felt his stomach twist. They weren't talking about him as family. They were talking about him as though he were baggage. The maid, Auntie Grace, was summoned. Nervous but tempted, she agreed quickly when the promise of extra money was laid before her. "You will raise him as usual," Uncle Simon instructed. "Feed him, take him to school. Nothing more. We'll handle the property. Understand?" "Yes, sir," she replied, bowing slightly. Her eyes lingered on John for a moment. Half pity, half calculation. In that moment, John realized how alone he truly was. Pastor Dubé had witnessed the exchange from the shadows. His fists clenched at their coldness, but he remembered the Moyo's last instructions. The estate was sealed, bonded for the Christian college, hidden even from greedy hands like these. For now, he had to remain silent. That evening, he visited John in his room. The boy sat quietly on the bed, hugging his knees. "Uncle Pastor," John whispered, "why don't my uncles love me? Mama said family should always care." The pastor swallowed hard, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Not all who share our blood share our hearts, John. But you are not forgotten. God sees you. And He has already made a way for your future." John leaned against him, silent tears soaking the pastor's sleeve. The years passed quietly on Grandma Dube's farm. John was no longer the timid child clutching a worn schoolbag, he was growing into a determined young man. Books became his treasure. By lantern light he devoured every story, every textbook he could borrow. His teachers marveled at his sharp mind and unyielding discipline. "This boy," one said, shaking his head in wonder, "is destined for greatness." But John never let praise swell his heart. Each evening, he knelt with his grandmother in prayer, thanking God for the gift of knowledge. One afternoon, after a long day at school, John sat under the mango tree with Grandma. The sun painted the fields golden, and the air buzzed with cicadas. "Grandma," he asked, "why do people become so greedy? My uncles, they wanted to take everything. Why?" She looked at him thoughtfully, folding her hands. "Because greed blinds the heart, my child. It makes men forget God and forget love. But you, God is training you to be different. Your parents sowed seeds of faith, and those seeds are growing in you." Her words sank deep into his spirit. That night, as he prayed, John whispered, "Lord, let me grow into a man who defends truth. Let me protect those who cannot protect themselves." At school, his sense of justice began to shine. When bullies cornered younger children, John stood firm. When classmates argued, he mediated calmly. Teachers began calling him the peacemaker. One teacher, noticing his talent for debate, pulled him aside. "John, have you ever thought about becoming a lawyer? You argue with such clarity, and your heart seeks fairness. The world needs men like you in the courts." The idea struck him like a lightning bolt. That evening he told Grandma, his eyes glowing. She clasped his hands and smiled. "Ah! God is showing you the path He has chosen." From that day, John's studies carried a sharper focus. Every essay, every debate, every exam felt like another step toward that destiny. By the time he turned 16, John had built a reputation for integrity and brilliance. The pastor and his wife often visited, bursting with pride. "Your parents would rejoice if they saw you now," the pastor told him. But John only smiled humbly. "It is God's grace, Uncle Pastor. Without Him, I would be nothing." And deep inside, he knew the day would come when God's hand would reveal why his childhood had been sealed in pain and faith. The seeds of destiny were sown. Soon, they would bloom. Time slipped by like the slow turning of seasons. John was no longer a boy running barefoot across the farm, he was a young man with sharp eyes, broad shoulders, and a steady walk. At school, he ranked among the top students in the district. His essays on justice and leadership were read aloud by teachers as examples. Scholarships opened doors to prestigious colleges, and soon John was walking corridors where the children of wealthy families studied. Yet unlike them, John never flaunted pride. He remembered nights of hunger, the neglect of his uncles, and the prayers of his grandmother. Those memories kept him humble, and hungry for truth. Meanwhile, in the city, the uncles grew restless. Every few years they would try again to access the Moyo properties, and each time the same cold answer returned from the bank. The estate remains sealed until the bond is fully paid. Their frustration festered into bitterness. "When 15 years are over," Uncle Patrick growled, "that boy will be a man. He will think the world belongs to him. But we will be waiting." They did not know that the very delay they cursed was the protection that kept John's inheritance safe. On the farm, John spent long hours reading law, history, and scripture. He learned to weave wisdom from both, the law of men and the law of God. Often, he would sit with Pastor Dubé, now grayer and slower, discussing deep matters. "Uncle Pastor," John asked one evening, "why do you think my parents sealed everything so carefully?" The pastor's eyes softened. "Because they knew the hearts of men. But more than that, they obeyed God's voice. Their obedience preserved your destiny. One day, John, you will stand in a place where truth will confront deceit, and justice will speak louder than greed." The words burned in John's heart. He wrote them in his journal and carried them like a prophecy. When he entered university to study law, John walked with quiet confidence. Professors admired his discipline, classmates admired his integrity. Yet he remained grounded. Each Sunday he attended church faithfully, and each morning he prayed under the same mango tree where his grandmother had once counseled him. At 21, John graduated with honors. By 22, he was working with a respected legal firm, already earning recognition for his sharp arguments and unshakable principles. And then, at 23, the waiting ended. The bond was finally paid in full. The Moyos estate was released, the secret clauses opened, and John's name shone across the documents as the rightful heir. News spread like wildfire, reaching even the ears of his uncles. Their eyes widened with shock. "So the boy still lives," they muttered. "And now he stands between us and everything we wanted." But what they did not know was that destiny had prepared John for this very hour. The courtroom would be their battlefield. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps. A crowd had gathered, whispering about the high-profile case that had captured the city's attention, the long-sealed Moyo estate. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The Moyos uncles sat confidently, expecting an easy victory. They had rehearsed their arguments, confident that 15 years of waiting had finally given them the upper hand. The doors opened, and the young lawyer entered. Calm, composed, and dressed in a sharp suit, he carried himself with quiet authority. His uncles glanced up, and froze. John Moyo. The boy they had dismissed, neglected, and left behind. Now, he was a man, their opponent, and the rightful heir. "Is that him?" whispered Uncle Patrick, pale. The judge called the session to order. The uncles presented their case first, speaking of family rights and their years of guardianship. Their words dripped with entitlement, ignoring the neglect and scheming of the past. When it was John's turn, he rose slowly, his voice steady and clear. "Your Honor," he said, "I am John Moyo, son of the late Mr. and Mrs. Moyo. My parents entrusted their estate to God's guidance, secured it with a bond to fund a Christian college, and instructed that it remain sealed for 15 years. Today, that period has ended." Gasps filled the courtroom. The uncles' mouths opened and closed, unable to speak. John presented the sealed documents, bank statements, the signed bond, and the church's repayment records. Every detail matched the instructions left by his parents. "This estate," he continued, "was never meant for greed. It was meant to bless God's work and prepare me for the responsibilities I now accept. All claims to it are legally and morally null except for mine, as my parents intended." The judge adjusted his glasses, peering over the top. "I have reviewed the evidence thoroughly. The court finds the estate belongs entirely to John Moyo. Any claim by the uncles is rejected." A hush fell over the room. The uncles' heads sank in shame. The boy they had scorned, the orphan they had abandoned, now stood victorious, not with anger, but with righteousness and integrity. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for a word. Cameras flashed, but John's attention was elsewhere. He looked at his uncles, weary and humbled. "God has been faithful," he said quietly. "What you meant for evil, He has turned for good." And in that moment, John felt a deep peace. The years of waiting, study, prayer, and love from his grandmother and pastor had all led to this, justice served, faith honored, and destiny fulfilled. The courtroom emptied, leaving John standing at the center of a life he had only dreamed of as a boy. The weight of 15 years of waiting, praying, studying, and growing was now behind him, replaced by a calm certainty that justice had been done. His uncles lingered near the doorway, shame etched in every line of their faces. They had underestimated him, underestimated the foresight of his parents, and most of all, underestimated the God who had protected him. John approached them slowly, his footsteps steady. The room seemed to hold its breath. "Uncles," he said softly, "I know you hoped to take what was not yours. But I forgive you. You did not love me as family should, yet God has given me everything I need, and more." They looked at him, bewildered. Some eyes filled with regret, others with disbelief. Words failed them. The boy they had once ignored was now the man who held the law, the truth, and the estate firmly in his hands. Pastor Dubé, standing nearby, nodded. "Your parents trusted God with you, John. And He has proven faithful. You have honored them, and you have honored Him." Outside the courthouse, sunlight fell gently on the city streets. John felt the breeze on his face, the same wind that had carried him through years of prayer, study, and quiet perseverance. He realized something profound: God's timing is perfect, and no human greed can thwart it. Later, at the newly built Christian college, John walked through the halls, now filled with students and teachers. Each classroom, each desk, each corner reminded him of the faithfulness of his parents, the prayers of his grandmother, and the guidance of Pastor Dubé. The legacy they had invested in God's work had been returned, multiplied in ways he could never have imagined. He paused in the chapel, kneeling to pray, "Lord, thank you for keeping me. Thank you for the trials that shaped me, and for the love that sustained me. Let me now serve others as faithfully as you have served me." The story of John Moyo, the orphan whose inheritance was sealed for 15 years, was now a testament, not to revenge, not to wealth, but to faith, perseverance, and grace. For in the end, what God blesses cannot be stolen, what He protects cannot be broken, and what He promises is always fulfilled. They left him an orphan. They thought greed would win. But 15 years later, destiny, faith, and justice would reveal the truth.